This is the Expect Miracles podcast. Enjoy the show. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Expect Miracles podcast. If you are enjoying these episodes, please hit the subscribe button below for more weekly episodes. Today on the Expect Miracles podcast, we have Dr. Julia Britz. I love this podcast because it gives me the opportunity to sit down and learn from some brilliant people, and Dr. Julia is one of those people. Her own personal story is why I was so excited to have her on the Expect Miracles podcast. Dr. Britz is a naturopathic doctor that specializes in integrative mental health, more specifically anxiety disorders like OCD, eating disorders, psychiatric medication tapering, as well as depression and mood disorders. Dr. Julia had many diagnoses on her own health journey, and a lot of doctors told her she was not going to get better, but she proved them wrong, and she got her life back through naturopathic medicine and NAD therapy. And now she is on a mission to help as many people as possible get their lives back. That is such a beautiful thing when one person heals from something and they make it their life's mission to help others heal. And that's why she's such a great doctor and is doing such a beautiful job. If you want to check out her TED Talk, it's called My OCD Diary. And without further ado, we are going to get this episode going. Please welcome Dr. Julia Britz. Today on the Expect Miracles podcast, we have a very special guest, Julia Britz. She is a naturopathic doctor out of Sedona, Arizona, out of a holistic behavioral health center, and she also does telemedicine. And Julia has such an amazing story. I'm very excited to have her on the podcast because, like I said before, her story is amazing, and now she is helping other people with what she was going through, and that's what the podcast is all about. So please welcome Dr. Julia Britz. Julia, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know we have a mutual patient that connected us, and she just speaks so highly of you, and she only sees top of the line people. So I'm very excited to have you on today and for you to share your story.
Oh, thank you. I'm super excited to be here, and I love what you do. And I mean, I love working. I mean, team care is so important. I love when patients have a whole bunch of people on their side.
Absolutely. So Julia, where are you from originally?
Originally, I sort of lived all over, but we'll say San Diego. So that's where I went to high school and medical school and moved back and forth. And it's a great place to be. So
one of the best.
Yeah. And now I'm in Sedona, which is very different, but I spent a lot of time in Vegas. So I'm used to the desert scene as well. It's pretty cool.
It gets pretty cold over in Sedona too, right?
Yeah, frigid.
That's something I didn't know. Like, I was very naive about the entire state of Arizona before I went. I thought it was just all hot sun everywhere, and it snows and it gets pretty cold in some places. I just did not know that.
I know, me neither.
Julia, what were you into growing up as a kid?
Well, as a kid, I think I was often found playing on the swing set with my brother and sister. They're still my best friends.
Nice.
And we grew up as in little kids in the Northwest, kind of in Woodinville, Redmond, Washington. So beautiful forest, fairyland kind of stuff, super magical, honestly. Yeah, so it was great. And then I went to high school in Carlsbad, California. So I grew up a little bit in the beach scene too. And it really wasn't until, I think I had a pretty great childhood actually, but it wasn't until I was 19 about when my OCD started getting pretty bad. And as a kid, it was kind of unnoticed because I liked routine things. So I did a lot of solitaire. Like I played that game a lot, and puzzles, and I organized my stuffed animals. So I liked being alone as a kid. It didn't kind of get tweaky till I was older, but I do think there's some interesting things when I look back. This may not have been the answer to your question at all.
No, it 100% is. It's a great segue.
Good. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting to look back and see how I was creative in a solitary way and how it just went down a different path that was harder. But overall, yeah, it was kind of cool growing up and seeing my siblings grow up their own way and me mine.
Now, at 19, you said the OCD kind of became a problem. What happened at 19 where you're like, did somebody else have to step in and be like, listen, there's something going on here that we need to address?
I think 19 was a big year for me just because that's when I went to college. And so I think that was a trigger, just a whole new environment, a whole new space. I just moved out. And I think all that life stress was enough for my body to kind of respond in a way that was like, hey, how do we cope with this? And I think I've noticed for a lot of people in my practice with OCD as well, usually perfectionistic kids, usually interested in control, trying to get the anxiety to go away really quickly. So I think for me, I could not control a lot of what happened first year in college.
Absolutely. Not many people can.
I know. So I hit it very well, though. So I would drive into the school parking lot multiple times. I'd repark the car hundreds of times.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And if you looked in my radio, you'd see the button that said power on and off. And it was completely gone because I pushed it so many times on the car ride there. So just radio on, radio off, radio on, radio off, and then park, repark, park, repark. And then I would walk backwards to campus, and we had a lot of stairs, so it was challenging.
So you'd walk up the stairs backwards.
Right.
Wow.
And I would have to time it so a lot of people wouldn't notice it, or I'd go slowly as if I was just waiting around for something, but I was late for everything just because this took time. And so, yeah.
So what would happen if you weren't able to walk up the steps backwards, or if you weren't able to park your car exactly right? What happens then?
So usually those things would be instigated from a thought. That was what would start the whole thing. And so a thought would be, I wonder if I accidentally ran over somebody on the freeway. Oh no, I thought it must be true. How do I get this thought out? I have to repark a bunch of times. And so it'd usually be me being concerned about hurting other people by accident, or maybe worried that I was conjuring up a spirit. That was another common one. So like if I didn't hit the button exactly right, that meant that somebody in my family was at risk of being haunted.
Wow. That's a heavy load on your shoulders there.
Yeah, it was a lot because I knew that it was irrational, but there was part of me that felt like it must be true because the feelings were so intense.
Now that's interesting. You said like this, I know it's just an example you threw out, but the freeway thing where you clearly didn't hit anybody on the way to school, but there was that thought that it might be true in the back of your head.
Right. And so I would exit and do that multiple times. And then by the fifth or sixth time of going around this exit, come back on the highway and looking around, knowing for sure I hadn't done it, but wondering if I hadn't done it, then why is this feeling so strong? I must have done it. I'm just not seeing it. So then I would just continue to do it until the anxiety would go away. And then I'd think, okay, maybe I didn't do it. And then that would start the tapping of the radio button because that would help calm my nerves too. And it would just go on the whole day, basically.
And what did a good day look like for you? Even like if you had good thoughts, was there still a lot of OCD going on then?
It seemed like once the ball got rolling without treatment, it just kind of got more and more intense. But a good day would be if I was able to avoid triggers, like if I wasn't going to school on the weekend and I could just sort of stay home, hang out, that would be easier. But then I'd have my little home routine as well. Like I couldn't get dressed by myself. I would need to have my ex-husband pick out an outfit for me because I would put one on, have a bad thought, want to take it off, put on something else, and I would just be stuck in a pile of clothes. So washing my hands was a big one. And that was the first thing that I think people noticed was how long it was taking me to get out of the bathroom. Because I'd be washing my hands so much, my hands would usually be bloody. So it wasn't everything else I could hide or come up with a good story for. And that was sort of the point where people were noticing I was quirky. And I think there's a fine line between being quirky and actually having a disorder. And so it was, people want to believe you. They do. They want to, if you say like, no, it's okay, I'm quirky, I'm fine. They go, okay, good. It's a relief. So no one pushes it.
So how does this play out now? You're going to school, you're walking up the steps backwards, you're constantly washing your hands. What's happening next? And how long were you able to do that before? Did somebody else step in or you were like, I need to get some help here?
So I figured out there was a problem that I couldn't handle myself when I was at my dad's house in Vegas. And I looked at an old family photo on the wall and it triggered a negative thought for me about like the supernatural. And I was at my sink rinsing out dust from a glass. And 20 minutes later, there's obviously nothing wrong with the glass, but I'm still doing it. And I realized that I cannot pull away even though I want to. And so at this point, I'm crying. I know that there's something wrong. And I start Googling like cancel out bad thought with action, repeat action over, stuff like that. And OCD came up and it was me. I thought, okay, that's what I have. Oh no, what do I do? And so luckily my sister was really supportive and she's the first person I told. And she said, I love you. I don't know how to deal with this though, but let's figure out how to find a good therapist for you. And that's what started that. And that was great. I think having her be so understanding and not as judgmental as I was about myself, it allowed me to be a little bit more brave and to go forward and try to find somebody to help me.
Now, what was therapy like for you? Did you find it very beneficial, or did you have to go through a couple people before you found the right person?
Therapy was amazing. And if you find a therapist you work well with, that can make or break it. I would argue finding a strong therapeutic alliance with a therapist that you can trust is more beneficial than the style of therapy or the modality, like CBT versus ACT. A lot of them have similar success rates. So it's really, for me, it was crucial to find somebody that I really felt I could tell, because these were really shameful thoughts I was having.
Right.
Very embarrassing stuff. So the first therapist I saw was actually at my school, and she was very kind, but had no experience in dealing with OCD. But, we were still at a place where she could help me at least admit it. So the first step. And then I tried a few therapists out. The one that I actually liked the very best, he specialized in acceptance and commitment therapy, which made a lot of sense to me because it wasn't about stopping the behavior. I clearly had been through enough embarrassment walking upstairs and that wasn't the concern. I could deal with that. I couldn't deal with the anxiety and the constant thinking and thought loops. Like I couldn't sleep. I was laying in bed, flipping over on my stomach, flipping on my back, flipping on my stomach, flipping on my back, counting, blinking with my counts. So for me, I was like, I don't care if I look crazy as long as I don't feel crazy.
Absolutely. Okay. So when you first started therapy, did they want to throw medications at you, or did they just want to talk things out and see if they can trigger the patterns that were happening and leave it alone by itself?
They did want me to try Zoloft in the beginning, which I did not want to do. I've actually never taken an SSRI. I was too scared of the side effects because to me, it just seemed like something I couldn't control what the drug was doing to me. So I wanted to make sure I had total control of what I was doing. And I agreed that if therapy didn't really work, I would consider doing a medication, but I wanted to try the least invasive option first. And even though therapists had told me I was the most severe case they'd ever seen, they can't make me take a med. So they were willing. It was good.
Good for you for researching the side effects and just not taking someone's word for this is how you're going to get better.
Yeah.
Because on the flip side of that, I did that. I was on SSRIs for like brain injury, depression, and hand tremors and just pain. And the doctor was like, this is how you're going to get better. And I'm not much of I take people's word for things, and it's something I should have researched and everything, but I just took him because I took his word for it. And I backtracked and realized that wasn't the way I wanted to go. So it worked out in the end, but good for you for doing your due diligence and research. And I think that's a great way to go about it too, making that deal with the therapist that like, listen, let me try this. If it doesn't work out, we'll go your route.
Right. And we all just do the best we can and we're stressed and we need guidance. Like we all can't be around advocates all the time. And I do believe deep down a lot of doctors really just want to do like what they think is going to help us, And I also know that sometimes not everyone's as informed and, like I knew more about my OCD than anybody else did. And so it was really important to me that, and again, it's the control issue, but it was really important to me that I was comfortable with what I was going to do. And some things didn't work out very well, but I did, for example, I was given Ativan, which is a benzo, from a really, really kind ER doctor because she noticed I was really anxious. I was at the hospital for the umpteenth time, fearing that my liver was going to fail, as I usually did. And she said, "Why is your heart rate so high?" I said, "I always have high heart rate. I have OCD. Are you on meds?" "No." "Okay, and it was like the shining bottle of Ativan with the glowing rays around it, where it's just like this beautiful thing coming at you. And I was like, oh, okay. And I love the idea of it being fast acting. I could take it when I wanted to. I didn't have to do it every day. It seemed like a very, casual relationship that I could have with a med. Unfortunately, it did lead me down to a path where I was getting it across the border. I went to Mexico to get as much as I could get my hands on because I'd become dependent on it. And was self-medicating that way. So a whole other can of worms there.
So how did it go with the therapy? What was like the time frame where you really started seeing some good results?
I did 2 appointments a week with my ACT therapist for a year. And I would say around every month I noticed improvement, that we had lots of great exercises. And that's what's cool about ACT is you have tons of homework. And so like one I really remember was he asked me to cover my eyes with my hands. And he said, open your eyes. What do you see? And I said, just black, because it's totally dark. And he goes, great. Now move it just an inch away. What do you see? And I was like, kind of red, pinkish light coming between some things. And those were my fingers. And then he had me do it again. And then he's like, what do you see now? And I was like, well, now I'm starting to see the room out of my periphery. And he's like, right. This is an example of how when you step away from the problem and see it as separate from yourself, that you will get a clearer picture of what's happening. Because I felt so trapped from my OC. I felt like I was, bullied by my brain. I was just stuck inside. So I love those parts of ACT where I could just get an analogy and go, oh, that makes sense. Okay, cool. And sort of apply it in a different way to my brain.
Very cool. And now, so you're in college. Was med school something you always wanted to do, or was this an avenue you went down after you started seeing some improvements in the OCD?
It was after I started seeing a doctor of naturopathic medicine.
Tell me about that, because you said, is this the same therapist you were seeing, or?
No,
okay,
different person.
Tell me how you landed in a naturopathic office.
So I actually was seeing a chiropractor, and he asked me how my period was. And I was like, what? What are you doing asking about my menstrual cycle, I said, it's not great. I've got pretty bad PMS. And he gave me black currant seed oil and B vitamins, a few other things. And I slept great that night. And so I called him and I was like, I have so many problems. Like, what else can you do? And he's like, oh, no. You need to talk to my mom. She's a naturopathic doctor.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And he goes, she'll be in town this weekend. I went to go see her. And she said, what's wrong? And I said, well, I've had whooping cough 3 times this year. I've had staph infections multiple times. I get ear infections chronically. I've had strep 20 times, including irregular strains that they couldn't type. I'm always sick with something. And she goes, well, what about your OCD? And I was like, what? How do you know I have that?
Really?
Yeah, it was spooky. She goes, we can do stuff for that. And I was like, oh, no, I'm in therapy. I've already been told there's nothing I can do. I've told I can't get better. I've been told that meds will take the edge off at best. And then realistically, therapy is a good way to help take a little bit of the edge, but I'm good. And she said, no, we can definitely do stuff. So I was like, all right. So I left with like $500 worth of supplements.
Wow.
Yeah. Going, okay, I guess it's okay, worth a shot. So, and within a month, my OCD was completely gone.
No way. That is amazing.
I know.
Wow. So what supplements were you given that really made an effect for the better?
Let's see. I'm trying to remember. Well.
And was it something that you needed to keep doing every month or else they would come back?
Yes. So she put me on a diet that was free of sugar, dairy, gluten, tomatoes, chocolate, turkey, green bell peppers. Yeah. So a lot of specifics. And she let me know, these are not food allergies for everybody. These are not necessarily food sensitivities for everybody. But right now, my body is reacting based on its current chemical state to certain things. So we take out those food triggers, inflammation is going to go down, which means the body's going to work better. We also dealt with my hormones. I had really, really low progesterone. My thyroid was subclinically hypofunctioning. That was another big issue.
So I'm guessing they did like a full blood panel and everything to see what was going on?
Yeah. So we did everything. And I also wasn't sleeping at all, which I really needed to deal with in therapy because it was so much psychological for me. I had panic attacks, I had seizures, all kinds of things were happening. So once we figured out physiologically what was going on, and then adding on the nutrients or the supplements to help modify those complications, then I was doing better. Because I think what was happening is that my progesterone was low, partially because there's a cortisol steal happening. So my cortisol levels are constantly up, so I'm always in fight or flight. My thyroid's under functioning, which means my body is just trying to get some salts, but it's not really happening. The cofactors aren't there, like the selenium. The B vitamins are getting pulled from stress like they usually do. So getting all those things back in is going to help my body just start to re-regulate, because we don't know if is the OCD causing this, or is this causing the OCD? Is the thyroid? We don't know. The best thing to do is just to get it all to kind of stop, turn the barge around a little bit. So I was taking a lot of amino acids, different vitamins, a couple herbs. Funny enough, the thing that people think about with OCD is serotonin. They always think, oh, you have low serotonin. I didn't do well on 5-HTP or tryptophan, and it did not touch it. For me, GABA was very helpful. And I've had other people, and that's why as a doctor, I always run labs, because I don't ever see a consistent pattern with OCD. It's very specific. So I've had people do great on L-DOPA. I've had people do good on melatonin. I've had people do good on 5-HTP, but not tryptophan, et cetera. So there's no like...
And vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's changed over time. Like the supplements I was on back then are different now, because the ones I went on, my chemistry shifted. And so then I didn't really need them anymore. And then we shifted to different supplements based on my new chemistry. And so then if I go through a time of great stress, my chemistry again will shift, my hormones will shift, my supplements will react differently. So I do get checkups still every couple, maybe twice a year, so I can readjust based on how I'm doing.
Wow. So after you met this wonderful woman, you enrolled in naturopathic school?
Right. I thought, you know what, if I am lucky enough to come totally at 180, and I'm also interested in it, and that's part of OCD is I did at least got hyper focused on researching what I could do, what was wrong, what could help, and sort of a coping mechanism to dealing with it, feeling you have some control over your own care. And I thought, great, if I'm in school, I get to research all the time, so that'll work. And so that's absolutely why I went into med school, is because I feel like I get it. And I've never wanted to be a doctor that was like, I'm the one up, you're the one down. I'm the doctor, you're the patient. I'm going to help you. I'm going to fix you. I wanted to be more of an advocate and more of as someone that just was like, hey, you tell me what's up. I'll do the labs and we'll just see what comes up.
Yeah. And you do meet those people, these doctors, and like we said, they definitely have your best interest, but it's almost like you go in as a patient and you're looking up at them, like they're up here, you're down here, and it's like, this is what you have to do. And that's a beautiful thing when the patient come to you and say, this is what's going on, and you absorb it and you can find the best direction in order to take that person's healthcare. And there's a very powerful aspect of healing when somebody comes in to your practice for OCD. They know your story. They know you've been through it. I feel like the healing powers are so strong in that setting, because right off the bat, you can relate to everything they're saying.
Yeah, I think it is so important because, and not to say that everyone has to have had a story, but I do think it brings us some kind of connection and empathy. And it took me a while to not want to walk through the mud with them and go through my trauma again. I wanted to hold their hand through it, but I didn't need to feel it with them. And so it's been another step of my own healing journey is help, because I do see people that were just like me, and it brings up memories. And so it's kind of interesting how things kind of layer out and unfold, and we never stop getting better. And that's kind of what I tell people is, it's not like the finish line is healthy. Like you're unhealthy and then you have to get to the finish line and be healthy. There's a difference between being healthy and healing. Life is about healing. As long as you're going in that direction, little steps, like you are healthy. Otherwise it's this place we'll never get to. We'll constantly just be trying to, reach the finish line.
So I have a couple questions for you. The second one, I want to talk about your practice and all the great work you're doing, but I heard you mention a couple times supernatural. How does that play? How does that impact your life, your practice? What do you mean by the supernatural? Because I heard you say it a couple times, and I'm always very interested in this. So if you could just elaborate on that. Yeah.
So I think for me, when I say supernatural, I mean energies and also ghosts, things that are unseen. And I think just being a really sensitive kid, because very empathic, I always thought disasters were my fault. I couldn't watch the news because if there was a war going on, I knew I caused it in some way. That unseen thing, it's like you couldn't prove it or disprove it. So I had a hard time with the logic part. And we always think we can use our logic to outsmart our OCD brain, but it never works. So for me, I would see these pictures, like I remember being a claim jumper as a kid, and I would see these black and white photos on the wall, and I couldn't look at them because I thought that I would connect with that spirit or something, and it would haunt me or haunt someone else. And then energies as well. I read the book The Secret, which was just the worst thing I could have ever read, but but really it's because it was this idea of magical thinking. It was like, oh, I really want the parking space, and if I want it bad enough, I'm going to get it. And
I could see that being a problem for somebody that has OCD. Absolutely, yeah.
Huge problem for someone with OCD, because it was this concept of, wow, if I'm not thinking perfectly, then I did it wrong. It's my fault. I caused it. And so there's a lot of self-blame and responsibility that happened with not thinking perfect. And so I think that was a huge aspect also of the concept of positive and negative energy. I'd heard so many people talk about that growing up, like, oh, positive energy, that person's got negative energy. And I was like, what? What are those things? And if I shook their hand and they had quote unquote negative energy, now it's on me, and now I'm dirty, and now I've got to go take 8 showers.
Wow. Very interesting. Do you see auras in people or anything, or do you see that energy?
No, And I actually got pretty afraid of, so there's something called scrupulosity, which is the sort of this phobia of religion, or that God's going to punish you very harshly. So it's pretty common in OCD. So I was very concerned I was sinning a lot. Like if I didn't think perfectly, that was a sin. And so it was very challenging to have a spiritual relationship or connection because of how much trauma I experienced thinking about it. So for me, I think I really abandoned intuition for a long time because I didn't want to have anything to do with the concept of unseen things, unseen feelings, unseen anything. So I had to really, really step back. And now I'm at a place where I do have a very safe feeling, spiritual connection. And a lot of that has to do with just me being in the right place and right time, and at a place where I'm ready to deal with it. Because I think before my OCD was so bad, there's too many factors that can be misinterpreted, and it's very challenging.
This is pretty eye-opening to me because I didn't know anything about OCD. And I think a lot of people only see the physical side of it. They see people touching the doorknobs and just doing that. And it looks more like a physical thing where it's like snap out of it, where there's a whole different emotional component and psychiatric component that you're not seeing, and probably so difficult for the person to even, how do they even jump in and explain it unless somebody's been through it?
Oh yeah. And
Crazy.
For a while I thought I was schizophrenic because the thoughts were so strong and the thoughts were in my own voice. So I thought, is that a voice? Am I having an auditory hallucination? Because I saw Lord of the Rings and how tormented Gollum was clutching his head. And I was so tormented. I was like, oh man, do I relate to that? But yeah, there's a lot of people that experience what it's called pure O, which is they have all the obsessive stuff, but nothing physical. And then there's the people that are very physical. So I was, but it did come off quirky. Like I would tap the counter with my fingertips. Just comes off nervous, but I was counting the whole time.
Wow. Dr. Julia, what does your practice look like?
So my practice now is, I have it set up in 2 ways. So I do a lot of telemedicine, and it's focused entirely on mental health. So I see a lot of people dealing with bipolar, schizophrenia, OCD, addiction, psychiatric med dependency. And that's what I focus on in my physical practice here. So I'm the director of the naturopathic medical department at the Alternative to Med Center in Sedona. And it's a holistic behavioral health center where we deal a lot with addiction. And most of the people coming in are trying to come off their psych meds. So classic example is someone was put on an SSRI for anxiety, depression, panic disorder. They've been on that for a few years. Now their issues are coming back, the med's not working, or they don't want to be on it anymore, whatever. They want to come off it, try to do that at home, can't do it. So I help people that are trying to come off their meds in a safe way using orthomolecular therapies like IV and supplements and really cool stuff.
Do you have a lot of patients that the families are bringing them to you and the patient doesn't necessarily know what's going on, and vice versa, where the patient actually they are having schizophrenic hallucinations and everything? They want, I'm sure you get a little bit of both, right?
Oh yeah.
And do you have success rate for the family that's like, please help our son or daughter, and they necessarily don't want to be there or don't know what's going on or don't want to open up to you?
That happens more than I would probably like. And I usually have hard talks with the families, just letting them know I am not here to make their kid do anything. It's completely up to them. And some people come in with resistance. My family brought me here. I don't want to be here. And after a while, they'll decide for themselves, I actually do want to do X, Y, and Z, but not this. And then other people just flat out, I don't want to be here. My parents made me. And I'm like, all right, cool. Well, then let's do what you do want to do. And the parents just have to deal with it.
Okay. So how do you keep that person in the door? I mean, obviously you don't want to make them do anything you're doing, but I'm sure you have some good tools to engage them a little bit or find it a little bit interesting. Like, do you open up with your story or?
Yeah. I mean, luckily for me, it's pretty rare. It's actually incredibly rare if someone comes in and doesn't want to do anything. And I think it's because deep down, everybody's got some interest in health because it has to do with each of us. Because we all like to hear our blood work. It's like your health horoscope, So most people, they love either sauna or doing foot baths or IV therapy. People usually really dig the IV therapy just because they feel better right away. And a lot of people don't know their symptoms are relevant. So I've got a lot of people coming in a little resistant, but then I'll mention, hey, this looks like you've got some gut issues and your thyroid's this way and your testosterone's doing this, whatever. And they'll go, oh, I actually do have gas and bloating.
Wow.
And then they get a little bit more interested. I'm like, I didn't know we could do something about that. And that's my favorite thing to see is when they get excited and they're ready to do a little bit of the work.
Tell me about the IV therapy. What type of therapies do you do via IV?
So what I do originally, or when people first come in, is I run their blood work. I do functional blood testing. So that means I'm not looking for disease states or markers. I'm actually looking for patterns. So when I also run the plasma amino acids to get a sense of what the neurotransmitters are doing, it's kind of indirect, but still I get a very clear picture of what people can and can't do. And it's pretty cool. So from that, I'll learn what they might be low in or deficient in, what cofactors like vitamins they might need, and I can customize a bag for them, which is really, really cool. And so and then of course I'll pay attention to the clinical symptoms. If they're experiencing insomnia or whatever, we'll deal with that too. But like I said, control is so important to me. I want to make sure the bag is exactly what I want it to be. So it's the most appropriate and customized thing for them. Because that's the beauty of it. You can get a clean product without fillers, put it in an IV bag, and it bypasses the gut for absorption issues, make it feel good right away. It's pretty cool.
How long do you recommend people, because I'm sure you have people from out of state or coming from far away, how long do you recommend people, assuming they have the time, to spend with you before you like to send them off back home? And I'm sure you give them things to work on at home, but what's people coming from far away, how long do you like to spend time with them for? Typically
between 30 and 90 days. So we do, because of all the adjunctive therapies we can do, like IV, sauna, foot baths, massage, exercise, supplementation, whatever else, we are able to do tapers a little quicker. So if you have no support, you have to taper slow or you will experience withdrawal or what they call drug discontinuation syndrome. So if we have all those different therapies that can clear things from the body, like a couple hours in IR sauna can help sweat it out, that can make a difference and people can generally feel better while they're going through it. The other thing people, I think, need to know is coming off of medication, there's a few reasons why they're in withdrawal. Number one, it's because there's an actual drug dependency and craving. Number two, it's because every medication will deplete the body of a certain nutrient. So benzos really pull out melatonin, B1, magnesium, antipsychotics, a lot of carnitine. Let's see what else. Lithium pulls out a lot of salt. So all those things come out. So let's just say we have a kid, 17, she's anxious, has panic disorder, maybe probably deficient in magnesium and B6. So when those are low, people see anxiety. Now she goes on, let's say Xanax, that's going to give her a lot more GABA. She's going to feel pretty calm. We're not going to notice that nutrient deficiency anymore. Now we take her off the med, and now all of a sudden that nutrient deficiency becomes really obvious. So we have anxiety from the nutrient deficiency and from the withdrawal, which compounds into a worsened taper experience.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about your experience with NAD therapy, IV therapy.
Oh, I love that stuff. So I first did that myself when I was coming off of Ativan.
Mm.
So I became dependent on Ativan when I was self-medicating, and I couldn't get off it. And it was at the low dose. It's usually where it happens. So I was taking a baby dose, experiencing those interdose withdrawals during the day. I was paranoid, sweating, felt like I had the flu, anxious, couldn't sleep. So a friend of mine, he gave me a little bit of NAD, and I felt really, really normal. Like I didn't feel great. I just felt, whoa, I'm okay. I can tolerate this feeling. I'm not super paranoid. I loved it. So that helped me get to the next lower dose. And so I started using NAD in my practice, and it's worked beautifully. So it's an awesome therapy. It stands for, and you probably know this, but it stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, and it helps flush out a lot of what's going on in the liver. So we don't experience a recycling of the drug. The cravings aren't so strong that way. And it also boosts oxytocin by flushing calcium through the pituitary gland. So it does a ton of different things that help people feel pretty good when they're tapering.
So it sounds like it's a great therapy for people coming off any type of drug or drug addiction, correct?
Correct.
Is there anything else that you would recommend it for?
I also use it, let's see here. I use it for a lot of things. I would say burnout is a huge thing. When people come in, they're just stressed, burnt out, and don't feel great. That's when I'll also kind of look at it. I've done it in lower doses for certain autoimmune conditions, can be pretty helpful. And that's why one reason sauna is so great is because it does naturally boost your NAD levels, just not quite as therapeutically, but it's pretty cool. So depression, OCD, anxiety, that kind of stuff can be really, really helpful. I do test people first to make sure that they're a good candidate, because not everybody responds great to NAD, and it can be expensive. So I want to make sure that we are going in pretty confident that it's going to do well.
I had a patient go out to a certain state for NAD therapy. They did it in conjunction with ketamine.
Oh, yeah.
Is that something you guys do? Because that was the first time I was hearing about that. And when you think ketamine, you're like, oh, wow. But some people have really great benefits from it. And I was wondering, do you work anything with ketamine as well or no?
Not too much. I don't. I've seen some people love ketamine, and it really helps get them to that next level past that depression slump they can't seem to get past. I've had other people that went in the K-hole and never came out, so I'm really cautious with it. And I make sure that if people are going to do it, it's done really thoughtfully. So ketamine, how it works is it's a glutamate antagonist. So so how it kind of works is that it blocks the glutamate receptors, which makes people feel calm. And then after that block is gone, we get another surge of glutamate, which gives them that energy and motivation that they don't have from the depression. So people can feel really good. Now, that's appropriate for someone with major depressive disorder, certain other conditions, but if they're prone to anxiety and the glutamate levels are already high, that's not going to feel good. So we have to make sure they're good candidates first.
Gotcha. So, Dr. Julia, where can people find you online and your practice and everything like that?
So I have two websites now. myocddiary.com. And the other one is Dr. Julia Britz, BRITZ, drjuliabritz.com. Beautiful.
Tell me, did you also do a TED Talk, or that's happening in the works?
Oh yeah, I did a TED Talk a few years ago, which was a lot of fun. So if you, go to YouTube, Julia Britz TED Talk, it'll come right up. But yeah, I did that one on OCD and the therapeutic benefits to storytelling. So a lot of times we like to vent as people, and part of the reason it helps is because it creates a sense, it creates logic to the story, and it strings it together. So it's not just bad feelings kind of running around the brain. So they've done a lot of research and shown that if we can tell our life story over and over, at least a few times to people, it will create sense to us, because then we'll see the highs and the lows together, and it won't just seem like all gloominess. And so then we can create a little bit of peace with it. So I use my story during the talk to show how this kind of works.
That's beautiful. How did that even come about, the TED Talks? Did somebody contact you, or?
I just decided that I wanted to do it. And so it was really cool. It was maybe a week before the end of the submission deadline. And I just messaged and I said, hey, I want to do one. And they wanted a video. It didn't really feel like making a video. So I linked them to I have a bunch of videos on my blog. So I just said, watch this one. And then I said, cool, let's do it.
Very awesome. Dr. Julia, at the end of every show, I like to ask all my guests, so what is one piece of advice that has really resonated with you that you would like to gift the audience? Could be absolutely anything.
Absolutely anything. Commit to not quitting, because it can really feel like, especially with anxiety, it's such a quick feeling. It's so intense. It's high pitched. It's like rush, and it makes us feel like we have to get rid of it just as quickly. But in reality, that will create an impulsive behavior. So it's easier if we can slowly breathe, slowly calm down, slowly take a moment to mindfully decide what we want to do. This takes practice in therapy, but I think it applies to everything, because we will have those moments where we just want to say, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. This is too hard. I'm just going to do whatever they said. And for me, I've had to say it a lot, but it resonates all the time. So just commit to not quitting.
I love that. Dr. Julia, thank you so much for coming on. I really loved your story. This is why I created the podcast, because it's such an amazing story. You're doing such great work. Thank you so much for coming on, and I would love to have you back on anytime.
Oh, thank you so much. My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, subscribe, give us 5 stars, and leave a review. It really helps boost the podcast and spread the good word. My chiropractic practice is located in West Orange, New Jersey at Montclair Upper Cervical Chiropractic. You can also find us on Facebook at Montclair Upper Cervical Chiropractic. All of my information is on my website at drkevinpecca.com, drkevinpecca.com. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Dr. Kevin Pecca for podcast episodes, patient testimonials, and educational videos. I have daily affirmations and inspirational quotes on Instagram at Easel Affirmations, EASEL Affirmations. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at drkevinpecca@gmail.com, drkevinpecca@gmail.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Cheers.